Welcome to Lumenaries, the podcast, the ultimate destination for all things lighting and production design. I'm your host, Christopher Bolton, and I'm thrilled to be your guide through the fascinating world of cutting-edge software and lighting design methodologies. Here at Luminary Learning, we're on a mission to illuminate your knowledge with insights from the brightest minds in the industry. Today's guest is none other than global TV lighting design superstar Joshua Cutts. He joins me on this episode to shed some light on his history in the industry and share some insights on how to get started in this exciting industry we've all dedicated our lives to, his approach to TV lighting for music on big shows like Eurovision, The Voice and Idols. His expertise stretches far and wide and includes designing installation systems for TV studios. So without further ado, let's dive into the brilliance of lighting and production design. Get ready for insights, stories and knowledge that'll spark your creativity. This is Lumenaries, the podcast, where the spotlight is on learning. Hi, Josh. Thanks for joining us. It's been quite a while since you and I have had the opportunity to work together. Thank you for taking the time to come out of your very busy schedule and joining us on the show. I think to get us started, maybe you want to share with the listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got into this crazy game.
Yeah, how's it, Chris? Good. Thanks for having me here. Absolutely don't mind hanging out and talking about our work together and stuff we've done and stuff that I've done. I've been around in this game for a while now, but I think I worked it out. I think I've been rigging lights for 30 years now. This year, so 30 years I've been doing this. I started out in theatre. Theatre was my starting ground at the Market Theatre. I worked there for about 8 years or 7 years or so.
So the Market Theatre, that's in Johannesburg, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, Market Theatre, Johannesburg. It's quite an old, famous theatre. It started in the apartheid times. Its main thing was that it was one of the first places that people of multiple races could perform on a single stage. So it's got a lot of history. So it was a great building to start in. From there, I grew slightly and fell in love with lighting in that space and how to create things with light. I then realized I needed to move on and move with technology. So I then worked at another company where I was sales and training on control desks so that I could learn a few things. And that for me was a great learning period because I then got delved straight into the complexities of control desks and how to control advanced lights and things like that. But that lasted for a couple of years. And because obviously being a designer, you want to get out there and get into the game.
Josh, obviously from what you've told me now, it sounds like you had more of a hands-on training. Did you do any actual formal training or did you work your way up through learn on the job?
I actually learned through the job. I didn't actually do any formal studying of any kind, just hands-on experience from the Market Theatre up through the ranks in the corporate world and into television. And every single one of them, you learn from people if you watch people and ask questions. And I did a lot of that, and I was quite hungry for knowledge. So I made sure that I was always in the front when there was someone and watching what they were doing and trying to adapt what they did into my workflow. And eventually that all evolved into something, But that doesn't mean that formal training isn't a good thing. I think formal training would be great if it was available.
Sorry, I actually wanted to ask you if there was any specific people that you recall that really influenced you in your early days of working at the Market Theatre and then developing on later on into the TV stuff.
So many people, so many people. If you go back, the early guys that I worked with, there was a guy named Richard Barnes who ran the lighting department there, who took me under his wing and kind of taught me the inner workings of a lighting plan and how to rig the lights safely and how to basically power up stuff and get it all going and deal with directors and stuff. And then you work with great lighting designers in the theatre, particularly Manny Manham, Dennis Hutchinson, Wesley France. These are all sort of pioneers of their art form and they have very distinct styles of lighting. So you just kind of watch what they do and hopefully learn from them, and then you move out into the corporate game, which is very different. And one of the guys that helped me quite a lot was Kurt Duprier in the early days of television, and J.R. Ruffley. He was another designer that I really admired and aspired to within the field.
It was definitely one of the best. Absolutely, I agree. Back in the day, he had huge influences on my career as well.
Yeah. No, big time, man. And just the way that he handled music and his general demeanor as a person was always a great thing to see, and a great inspiration. Tim Dunn and Hugh Turner, I mean, these guys are legends, and you watch the work they do, and you hope one day to try and be like them in some way, and be able to handle grand scale projects with what the ease that they used to show. They used to make it look easy, even though it wasn't. But you hope that one day you had the confidence to handle projects like that, like they did.
And I suppose even in those days with limited resources and budgets, unlike some of the international brands and Broadway theatre productions and those,
I think budgets are always limited. I don't think they've changed over time. I think there's always a budget problem anywhere in the world. I don't think that.
So from the early days, what was one of your fondest memories when you started working in the game? And I mean, initially working into the market theatre, initially when you walked onto the stage, the feeling that you got, what is it? What are the memories that sticks with you the most?
It's a strange one. I mean, obviously, that how quickly I fell in love with lighting was very, sort of uplifting, and I really enjoyed the challenge of the technology and this new form that created light and created stories on a stage. That was always great to me. But strangely enough, the fondest memories are an empty theatre. For me, an empty theatre is sort of I don't know, a holy grail, a happy place. I mean, I'd often go at lunchtime with no one there in an empty theatre, and I'd just go and sit in the theatre or lie on the stage and absorb that feeling and that smell of the space, because I feel that the theatre is filled with so much energy from all the performances and all the people that have walked those spaces, and that I believe that energy remains in the space. And if you
I
tap into
agree.
that energy, it really is, it's
I
magical.
agree.
Yeah.
I used to always come at least half an hour or 45 minutes before call time when I was working in theatre to just to sit there in quiet, especially the big opera houses. I found those the most entertaining spaces to sit, with the beautiful architecture and just the acoustics. I love that. I love that.
Yeah. No, there's
Um,
definitely a feeling in a theatre. Definitely.
cool. So,
Yeah.
jumping a bit more forward, how do you keep your skills up to date? Which formats and where do you find the information that keeps you at the cutting edge of your industry at the moment?
Nowadays, it's very different to when we first started. I think, we have access to everything on the internet. There is nothing you can't learn with a bit of a search. Any form of YouTube, of Google, and just reading, man. Read the manuals, speak to people, and basically conversations. And even I find that the gear suppliers are a great source of inspiration as well, because these guys are brought to speed on what is coming out, and have conversations with them. Don't go and visit them and ask them what's new, and Google the stuff and read the stuff and watch the videos. There's no reason why you can't do something. And
And I
often what I
suppose I
say, which is
suppose also trade shows. I mean, you and I have attended a few trade
yeah, yeah,
shows in our lives,
yeah,
and we've been very
yeah,
fortunate to travel to some of the factories as well and meet the manufacturers in person, which has been fantastic.
yeah. Just tap into the vibe of what people are talking about, and don't be afraid to try new technology, because I think it's there to be used. And I think what I often do, and it's probably a bit risky, but sometimes if there is a new piece of tech that I want to try, whether it be some automation of something, or triggering of something, or some advanced control of a media server of some sort, I tend to offer that service to a client on a small to medium scale project, and then set myself a deadline to achieve it. And that pressure of saying you can do it is helps me drive myself to learn it. Commit to
Absolutely,
it.
that's fantastic. Now, I do know
Yeah.
that you have recently made some changes, and you've gone across from the MA2 platform, which you and I worked on for many years, and you're now working on the MA3 platform. And tell me about your transition. How did you find that going from two to three?
It's been a bit of a slow process over a couple of years, but it's sped up in the last 6 months, I'd say. In the early days, I was a little bit apprehensive, but once I made the leap, I'm absolutely loving it at the moment. To be honest, I
Oh,
think
that's great.
what I found was that we often get intimidated by the new look, the new GUI, the new button layout, and that tends to some sort of anxiety and slow us down, and we think we're not good enough on it. But the truth is, some of the fundamentals of the MA2 are there. Everything you need is there, from your sequences and your groups and your presets, and your patches is very similar. If not, obviously it's got more to it, but if you're just doing the basics, it's got everything you need from a basic point of view. The
So all the nuts and
data,
bolts are basically in the same place,
all
in
of
the
them.
right place that
They
you need,
are.
eh?
They
Yeah.
are. They are. And then once you just learn how to build from the nuts and bolts, then you can start delving into the major features of what the MA3 tries to bring about. I mean,
Oh, that's
I think
great.
what I say to people these days is that lighting, yes, it is lighting design, but there's a new element to lighting in it. It's almost like, should I say, sort of information management, data management in a way, because everything is becoming so much more complex and everything has more features. So you have all this information that you need to manage from a data point of view. And I think consoles like MA3 start allowing you to do that in a more advanced and simpler way.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And now, to be honest with you, I'm more comfortable on MA3 than I am on MA2.
I must say the ability to be able to move your data pools around from show to show, I'm loving that. I'm finding the fact that that saves a lot of time and a lot of effort. Before, previously we used to rely heavily on our actual user profile, and I find that with MO3 there's so much more than just the user profile to depend on.
Data pools are
So
lots of fun, I have to say. So,
yeah, so would you recommend to other users to take the plunge to 3 if they're
I
currently
think
on 2?
it's inevitable. I think it's absolutely inevitable. I mean, the organicness of how it handles fixtures and the fluid motion with which it produces effects and produces a flow of movement within the lights is sort of a very visually pleasing way once you get used to it. It can really add sort of dynamics to a room, some very simple sequences within recipes and some great sort of phases across the rig that can be activated. So yeah, I would recommend it. It's going to feel intimidating, but like I said earlier, say you can do it and take it on a show, and you'll be surprised if you can do it.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely the way to go about it. So the next
100%.
thing I wanted to ask you was, let's talk a bit of design. I know you've been the production designer for Idols in South Africa for now, what was it, almost 2 decades? How many seasons did you do? I don't recall. I think it was
Four, 14 seasons. Yeah,
14
yeah,
seasons, 14 years on the same production.
yeah,
What is your
yeah,
what is your
yeah.
approach to designing a set and lighting design for something like Idols? And how do you
Hmm.
keep it interesting for so long, for so many years? I mean, each of your designs every year look spectacular. You've had a happy client for 14 years. How do you do it? What is your secret?
No, I think Idols has such a great producer director, Gavin Ratton, who's a very dynamic gentleman, and he always I always discuss things with him and lean on a starting point from there, and we move forward. And sometimes we choose a shape that we're following. Sometimes we choose a formation of some kind. Um, all of that kind of stuff. But I think over the years, every year I try and implement a new piece of technology into the show to try and keep it interesting. So, we started the early days, we didn't time code anything then. We just used to just build stuff. And I think first couple of seasons, I even busked a few songs. So then I moved it into some dynamic cue lists, and then we moved it into time code. And then we brought in something like QPilot to help us cut cameras. And then we brought in some robo spots for next year. And I think each year I look at what technology is there and what is available. And if there's something new, we try and bring it onto the show.
I suppose it's also
Grow from
it's
there.
also not just there to to make the clients happy, but also to keep you interested and focused and
Yeah, yeah,
learning something
exactly.
new, advancing your own skills, trying to push yourself, I suppose, on each production.
That's exactly it. And then
That's
also,
amazing.
your design ideas and styles change over the years. And towards the end now, what we've realized is that when we look at a rig, we try and group types of fixtures together within formations on the stage so that they almost behave like a single fixture, and they make more of a statement together rather than
Yep.
dispersing individual fixtures all over the place. So over the years we've learned to try and so we try different patterns of different types of fixtures in different places. to
And I
create a more
suppose often,
dynamic
I
experience.
suppose often it's using the same fixture types. It's just using them in different positions and stuff to try and keep it interesting.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
100%.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah,
Like you say, just
yeah,
keep pushing it. So I wanted to get more into the TV lighting aspect of it, the technical approach around it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
what's your approach towards key lighting for a TV production? In music in particular is so dynamic. Well, what kind of color temperatures do you aim for?
No, I mean
Yeah.
that in itself has changed so many times over the years. From my first experiences up to where it is now. So that I've always said, yes, there are some rules to how you do it. Yes, but lighting in itself is rules are, as lighting guys, we tend to break rules. So so rules are there as a guideline to me, and they do help us get to a point. And so now currently we do a single follow spot focus on them for a performance,
So you do a
straight on
straight a, a straight on from the front.
straight on, sit in line with the center camera as a single source, straight onto the performer's face. But that is only for a performance. When it comes to a presenter, I would then have a key and a fill, and then possibly use the follow spot just to add a bit of
I got you.
sort of smoothness on the front of the face. But for a music piece on a singer, single straight on the center camera really works well. And for a presenter, it helps to come with a key and fill.
Yeah.
But even that is because I was self-taught. I don't think I tend to follow the recommended angles of key and fill. I brought a lot of my 3-point lighting in from theatre into the way I
Yeah.
light television. So
Absolutely.
3-point lighting is there for a reason, and it helps you create depth and definition on a person's face. So even a theatrical 3-point lighting brought into a television environment, if that can achieve good things, good looks. But
So
color temperature wise,
what you're saying is there's no
yeah.
actual specific color temperature that you're aiming for. Is it really?
No, there is. No, there is. There is. I think, with technology these days, with the amount of LED screens you got and the amount of cold source projection, LED strip, that's all very cold. And, sort of the 6,000 Kelvin kind of scenario, even, 5, 6 or whatever. So I tend to bring my front light up to about 5,000 Kelvin,
Okay.
so that I can then cool down the front light, and therefore all my colors tend to match the LED screen. And the LED screen, when it produces a blue, it's blue. If there's a pink, it's there. But if you start lowering your color temperature down, the more you lower it down to 3.2, you start losing pinks and the purples.
Yeah, you get the muddiness in the camera as well. Hey.
Yeah. You get a lot more blue within the purples and pinks. So if you can get it to 5,000, that's good. It really helps
Absolutely.
a lot.
I know that we've previously aimed. Sometimes we've got it as high as 5.2, depending on the
Yeah,
size of the stage and the lighting fixtures
yeah.
we're using.
Newsroom, I sometimes run it at about 6,000 even.
I suppose
So
that'd be very different. It's a very
yeah.
different scenario when you're running illusion, but we'll get
Yeah.
to that a little bit later. For now, do you currently have any weapons of choice? And I'm talking specifically about fixtures for key lights.
If I'm honest, it's difficult to pinpoint a specific brand or a light or something, because this day and age, LED profiles, especially the moving head range, a lot of them are very similar in terms of how well they do it. Whether you're looking at sort of a Robe Esprit or a Eton Urus, or that kind of thing, it tends to give you what you need. The Clay Pacquiao rollers are fantastic as well. Even Elation has got the Proteus. So all of these LED profiles can give you what you want.
Okay.
I tend to focus on that, as long as it's got a decent framing and I can cut my color temperature. Look, a lot of things with a high CRI do help. People talk
Yes.
about the high CRI.
Mm.
It is better, but I tend to be able to mix most of those things myself with it.
When you're specking, have you moved away from the arc lamps? Are you going more for the LED lamp sources now?
I am actually, if I'm honest.
Okay.
And the main reason I do that is because in the arc sources you tend to get different intensities between different units based on the lamp life. So
Absolutely. That's one of the
sometimes
biggest
it
problems
takes
for me.
it takes a little bit of work to balance the stage. Whereas with the LED, you're generally going to get an even level across the stage to start with, and it's a lot simpler to to manipulate it, the way the lead source falls on the skin, So,
Okay, and I
and
suppose that
I mean,
also you also in South Africa you're working with a lot of dark skins and different
mm,
skin
mm,
tones altogether. And I know some of the problems we
mm,
used to have with the older arc lamps was a lot of green.
yeah,
And I know
yeah.
we used to mix in a bit of magenta on the flag to try and get rid of some of the green and stuff. So are you feeling like the LED technology has helped that in
No,
any way?
no, you still need to do it. You still need
Is
to
it
do it. There's still green. Green sneaks in
okay?
everywhere. So you still
Okay.
need to bring in a little bit of magenta just to take the edge off it, Built-in high CRI filter now these days, which does help get close there, But I mean, back to something that I use regularly, and what we have access to here in South Africa, obviously we have access to different stuff. I mean, we don't, unfortunately, not quite of the European market where we have access to as much technology as we need to. But the RoboSpot for me is my go-to thing at the moment for television.
That's
I'm
awesome.
tending to go, yeah, I'm tending to move to the RoboSpot as often as possible, especially for music, because
Okay.
it just makes it easier. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I mean, you and I have done hundreds of productions together, and I know one of the things that we've always leaned towards is a brighter backlight, in particular on the main performers. Now, maybe you could share with the listeners why we would do that, and what that does for the overall picture.
From my side, a backlight is as important as a key light or a front light. I think they should hold the same level of importance on any stage. Yeah, a picture is not complete unless that person has a backlight. It drives me
Absolutely.
nuts. For me, it completes the shape of a person, and the minute you throw a decent backlight onto a person with a front light, somehow the background itself tidies up. And I can't pinpoint exactly how, but suddenly it looks neater in the background, and
Mm.
you've given it more leeway in terms of the flares you want to add into the picture, and even if you've got less light in the background, if it's a bit dull, the backlight will make the whole picture seem sparkly and seem more edgy and have more shape to it. And yes, a bright one I do use sometimes, and nowadays I'm tending to color the backlight, with something like a steel or a light pink or a CTO on the scene. So
So you
behind the
actually go
slides,
a lot colder
yeah,
than what your front light
yeah,
is. That's always, I think, the contrast that
yeah,
gets it to look
yeah.
nice. I think the blend between the warm and the cold on the person also really helps the
Yeah.
picture pop nicely.
You'll find if I'm doing a warm scene, I might have a cold backlight, like a steel blue.
Yeah.
It helps the person jump out more. And if it's a cold scene, I might even do a CTO backlight. So
Okay.
have something very warm, like it's a 2,700 Kelvin, 3,000 Kelvin backlight. But
Yeah.
that's why something like an automated follow spot allows you to do that.
It really has changed the way we can change dynamics between scene to scene or song to song. I agree with you. So,
I agree.
if just, I think in brief, what would you say is your dirty little secret in creating these gorgeous images that you produce weekly on national TV?
I don't know if it's just something in your gut. It's you watch the picture, hey? Watch the screen like a hawk and focus on the screen and don't be afraid to adjust by 2% here, 1% there.
The
And
small
that
changes.
that 2% difference makes a huge difference. And
Absolutely.
also lately one of my secrets is having a very open iris, running at a 2.8 f-stop or a 3 f-stop, so that the camera's got a very sort of wide iris, and you can run at extremely low light on the stage, a lot lower than sometimes even the eye can see it in the venue, because that
Yeah.
creates it lets you get away with all of your mistakes within the background. It evens out all your errors. It makes the difference between all the dark spots and the bright spots. It closes the gap between them, and it
It
makes the
it
picture
also helps
seem.
the black levels. I think the black levels look better if you're not
Yeah,
blasting it from the front or the back with all your lights at 100%. It's one of the things
yeah,
I teach, and it's one of the things you and I taught in our original course, so lighting design course,
mm,
is that you have to not fight with the lights in the room, especially when there's
yeah,
cameras involved. A lot of people don't realize how important it is to get the LED screen at the back dropped right down. I think your and our magic
Oh,
number was 15% or
yeah,
14%, I
even
think,
12,
or
yeah,
even
12 or
12%
10.
to try and
No,
balance it, you know?
I won't lie. Often that's a discussion. I wouldn't say heated discussion. I think it's one that you have to convince any lead
Almost
technician, or
always. Yeah.
they don't want to do it. They don't want to go down. But the truth is that when you do go down to the right levels of lead screen, it does work on camera,
Okay, so
100%.
I know a lot of your successes are is owed to your personal relationships that you've built over the years with creatives, directors, choreographers. What is your approach to dealing with tough customers? You know, how do you balance what's possible with their expectations?
I think relationships, hey, and I just really believe in trying to be a good person, and trying to be a nice guy, and understand that we are all under pressure on this project. Nobody is different to anybody else, and yes, there are clients that have strange demands, and the truth is that they are the client, and if they want something, it's our job as the technical expert or designer to try and achieve their vision for them. It's not our job to be the vision. They have a vision, and we are there to supplement that vision and help them create it. So they're being difficult for whatever reason. You can't judge them for why they're being difficult. They could be under different pressure that you don't understand.
So I suppose your advice would be to just give them the room to be difficult, right?
Yeah, I think so. You can fight them on it, but it's just going to make the whole space uncomfortable. You gotta take it on the chin sometimes,
Yeah, absolutely.
and have thick skin. Don't
Yeah.
take things personally. But the truth is that the better relationships you can build with your client, the more chance you have of doing the job again next year. So if you start fighting with your client about it, and if you start being precious about your work and what you want to achieve, and make their life uncomfortable, there's a very good chance they're not going to hire you again, because why would they hire someone that makes them uncomfortable? They would,
100%.
they would rather have someone around that supports them. So
And I suppose that's why you've
really,
landed some of these gigs for periods like 14 years, because you're with that guy and
yes,
he doesn't want to work with anybody else. You
that's it.
sometimes when he's in a
Yeah,
bad mood, you listen to what he has to say and you give him the space. He is the
yeah,
boss,
yeah, yeah.
So I
And I
think
mean,
that's
and
important.
and often you'll find that if you have that relationship with your client, and you give them leeway and you support them and you make them feel good, when you tend to not have a good day, when you may be failing or falling behind on schedule, or not quite achieving something, they tend to be more forgiving towards you and give
Yeah.
you another chance.
So, talking about relationships, I know something that you taught me when I first started working with you in the TV side of things was it's very important to have a really good relationship with the shaders in the Obi van. Maybe you can share with our
Yeah.
listeners how you go about managing that relationship. What is the importance of that relationship to you?
I learned that I think in my first major television production that I ever did. I think it was Project Fame back in 2003, my first sort of intro into big live television, and I was definitely sort of out of my depth slightly, and I had a great division controller there named Louise Creel, who's a legend in our industry, and her ability to take my pictures and clean them up from her back end was taught, sort of laid the foundation for that. And then I took that further and realized that a lot of guys in our industry who aren't used to television will just generally think the Obi van or the camera crew are separate to us on a live event, and they won't interact with them, and tend to throw whatever light they have at the stage, and not understand that the vision controller is the actual final stop to what goes out there. And the more difficult we make their life, and the more difficult it is going to be to achieve great pictures. So
If it looks like rubbish,
yeah,
it's going to be their responsibility at the end of the day.
yeah. If it's inconsistent, one thing you must understand about television lighting: consistency is key. So don't give them varying levels of front light and backlight. What is your level must be your level throughout the entire broadcast. If you start throwing super bright scenes and super dark scenes, your vision controller is not going to be able to help you. They're going to get lost, and you're going to start working on two different spheres of each other.
Do you mean specifically with key lighting, or do you mean just with your levels in general?
Specifically with key lighting, because that's where the foundation starts. When it comes to television, the close-up is 80% of your show. 90% of your show is the close-up. Get that right, and it'll give you the time to fix the wide shot.
Okay.
That always helps. But I think communication with the vision controller is super, super important, and discussing things with them, like how bright you want to have it, and where his f-stop is going to sit, and allowing him to tell you when something's not right, and listening to him. And if you could start doing that, you'll be surprised when a vision controller says there's something wrong with the picture, and you listen to them, it tends to fix things. Yeah, and then suddenly they'll go to war for you because you're helping them.
Absolutely.
But make friends with them.
I suppose it's about keeping the communications open with them the whole time and making sure that they realize their role in the whole job.
Yeah, a trick that I do on all television productions is that the first day or two of rehearsals, I will communicate with the vision controller, and we will choose an f-stop level, whether it be 2.8, 3, 3.5. I don't go to 4 anymore, but we'll choose an f-stop, and we'll put every single camera in that f-stop range, and then I then ask them, and they agree. They do not touch the iris for 2 days, no matter what the picture looks like, so that I can then see where all the problems are and have those 2 days to balance my levels.
I suppose otherwise, if they start changing everything and trying to fix it from day one, it's a mess, because your levels are not going to be consistent, because you're still trying to program the show and get the looks out of it, right?
And then you don't know what's wrong because they've fixed it already. So you think it's fine, but it's actually not. So what I tend to do is that I tell them from final dress rehearsal, the cameras are yours. I said I'll fix what I can, and they'll take over. I give them final dress rehearsal to get used to adjusting anything they need to, and then we go to show. And it tends to work well when you do that.
Okay, so let's stick to the whole cameras and the OB vans and stuff. What do you do when you're dealing with somebody who's incompetent? And I'm speaking specifically camera directors, or shaders. If they're not doing a good job, how do you handle that politics?
I think you have to come to a realization sometimes on a project that a director might not be cutting the same sequence every time, or that a shader doesn't quite know how to balance their cameras, or is kind of a little bit all over the place. It can be a little bit unfortunate, but I think you have to find a safety zone for yourself. So, depending on the scale of director, you can then scale up how you achieve it, how you do something on the song. But if there's someone who's cutting all over the place, you have to play it a little bit safe, and almost try and make as many cameras look good as you possibly can in one go, instead of trying to try the clever tricks of going to darkness in some places and taking chances. You have to limit the chances you take and start playing it more safe, and try and light the entire space, so that the entire space looks good.
You would probably work out during a rehearsal, so you can kind of already tell whether this person's going to hack it or not, and then that would obviously you would adjust your style to make it more safe, I suppose.
If you have the luxury of using a system like QPilot, where every camera shot is designed to a time code piece, so you know exactly what camera they're going to be on at any given moment, then you can take some really advanced risks on your lighting and almost go to black at moments and back out again, and be cheeky with how you light a space, knowing that it's safe, that this part of the room is dark because you're never going to go there. But if a director is going to take any shot at any time, you have to light the whole space, because what will happen is that the director might take the shot anyway, and it's not the director that's going to look bad. It's you, the lighting guy, that's going to look bad because you haven't lit the space, even though you're trying something super creative. It doesn't always work. And it's the same with a shader. Sometimes you get shaders that are inconsistent in their iris levels and their colors and all that kind of stuff. So you have to be as consistent yourself as you can. Don't give them surprise levels. Even it out. If it's even, then he can do whatever he needs, you know.
So how would you explain your approach to programming for music? And I'm talking specifically about, tight turnaround times where you have to produce 10 time-coded songs a show for a week.
Cue lists, bro. Cue lists are the answer for television, because things need to be consistent every time, and a cue list allows you to build notes into your song, and allows you to follow a specific trigger timeline with a cue. So what I tend to do is the first run of a song, if I haven't had any sort of pre-production time or pre-studio time, um, then I would use the rehearsal in space to go the first run of the song. I build an empty cue list with labels of points within the song, and if you follow them while they're running the song, you can start off with the start of the song, when the vocal begins. Maybe there's a piece of choreography movement, dancers enter, and then you go verse and chorus and bridge, and so as it's happening, you building a sequential cue list with
So I
it, and
suppose
that way
as opposed to making the notes on a piece of paper,
that's it.
you are actually recording it straight in onto the console to save yourself some time.
100%, because then your notes are in order already, and the next time they run the song, you can actually start following them with your cue list, which then gives you a rehearsal.
That's
And at
fantastic.
that point, you can start adding information to those cues as they're doing stuff.
And then how
And it's
often do
about
you get the music beforehand? And do you get to when do you add the time coded aspect of it? Do you add it in venue? Do you add it before?
more and more. It's they're giving us stuff earlier. Definitely, it's getting easier to get stuff. So, for example, for idols, we tend to get the week's music on a Wednesday or a Tuesday, and go into venue on a Thursday or a Friday. So we have one day of sound checks with the artists, and then we have one day of camera rehearsals, and then the third day is the show. So we would get it a day before or 2 days before. So we would sit and build the cue lists, empty cue lists beforehand, and try and time code them beforehand. So that way, when we get to the sound check day, we have a time coded sequence of music, so that we can then let that run, and we can populate that cue list as we go. And lighting it's got many layers to it. The first pass of a song is never going to be the final pass. The first pass will be a rough edit, like anything you do in life when you edit it. For the first pass will just be some rough color changes, some rough effects, maybe a few key positions within the stage, and then the next time you listen to it, you refine those and maybe add a few more advanced moves. And then the fourth time you hear the song, you keep adding changes. And one of the things we say to ourselves often on a Saturday rehearsal, where everything just looks like a mess on camera the first time you see it, because it's your rough cut. We tell ourselves, trust the notes, write down notes for the song. And the great thing about having a cue list is that your note can be cue number specific. So you
That's
can
it.
say Q6 have more backlight.
Yeah.
Q7 needs a new position on stage. Q8's timing is off. Q9, not enough front light on BVs. And instead of then trying to rethink the song in your note section, you actually literally go into that Q number, adding light on the BV, fixing that. So your notes become more focused. And if you just go through those notes sequentially, the song just starts sculpting itself.
I must
And
say,
timing is
I
key.
used to enjoy working with the directors that prefer to use time code, and I would prefer it if they
Mm.
actually came and sat next to me at the lighting desk when we ran a song. So they would then look at my cue list running, and they would make notes saying, I mean, not everyone does this. Don't get me wrong, but he would say, okay, make a note Q5 more this, Q6 more that. But that's a great approach. Thank you for sharing some of your tips with me. I
I
think
think I
just to
think I think with yeah, I was going to add to that quickly.
Yes, no, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, music is all about the timing. Find the BPM of the song. Because when it comes to television, yes, obviously it's very different when you're within a busking environment, and that's not something I do a lot. So I'm speaking more specifically about a constructed piece of music. But take the time to find the BPM of the song, because if you get the timing right, that's half your work done.
Yeah.
and then automatically it has a good feeling to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so something I suppose that's a little bit more, I would I hate to say boring, but also challenging, is just quickly, like if you were designing a long-term studio installation, because I know that you also do a lot of that stuff.
Mm. Mm.
What is the most important foolproof tips you can advise people to follow? Taking budget
Well,
aside.
no, it's about neatness. It's very different to a live installation where you're going to rip it out all at the end. But it's about designing a solid, foolproof system that switches on every day, and everything needs to be neat. It needs to be run properly. Cables can't just be run around the corner and drop down and plugged into something. It has to follow. As if you are doing an installation in a house or in a space where people can see stuff. And in terms of lighting the people, you light them as you light them. If you light a person well, you light a person well. So I don't really change the way I light the people themselves within a permanent installation. You just follow your guidelines and light them as you need to, and don't overthink it. Trust your gut sometimes. Just light them the way you light them, and the rest will take care of itself. But create a system that is more solid and neater, because you're not there every day, and the operator needs to switch on and it needs to look the same every time.
So I suppose
So
it's
it has to be
it's
an
about
easy switch
designing
on.
something that's a bit more idiot proof.
Yeah, exactly. And then limit the amount of things they need to do on the console,
Yeah, absolutely.
because we are there, and if I'm there, I know I can tweak things. But you don't want to give every single operator the ability to tweak, because then they'll tweak themselves out of a good lighting situation.
Oh, out of a job.
Yeah,
That's funny.
that's happened.
Okay, cool. So, just we're getting towards the end of the conversation. Thank you so much for enlightening us with all your bits and pieces. If
My
you wouldn't
pleasure.
mind sharing with us, what was one of the highlights of your career?
Oh, I don't know. There's been such big moments. I mean, from successful Miss SA productions to Idols being 14 years of greatness, and obviously one of the big ones is obviously going to program Eurovision. Being part of the programming and operating team in Israel,
That
which
was
is
quite
a
special.
dream come true. Yeah, it's a dream come true. I mean,
That was
it's a
very
different
special.
playground, eh?
I
Different
mean, we were
playground.
talking earlier
Yeah,
about walking into the theater, or being in a quiet theater.
yeah.
But for me, it was the same when I walked into
Yeah.
that venue. I
Ah,
just wanted to, I
every
just
day,
wanted to cry. It was like
every day, every
Disneyland
day.
for Latin guys.
Yeah, yeah. No, 100%. It was
Yeah,
such a cool experience. I mean, it was hard work. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of pressure,
yeah,
but the great thing about I learned on Eurovision is that there are so many professionals in one space that are all focusing on
absolutely.
their part, and every single one of them is at the top of their game. So you can trust in your brothers and your sisters to have your back in
Yep,
situations on that show, and you don't have to pick up
absolutely.
the slack off and of someone else's work. You just stay in your lane, you do your job as well as you can, and you all meet together on the freeway of television, and suddenly all the cars are riding in a line,
Absolutely.
and it worked well. Yeah, yeah,
That was an amazing experience. Okay, so
yeah.
something fun. Have you ever made a mistake on the gig that's really got you into a lot of trouble? And how did you
You're,
deal with the repercussions after that?
I mean, everyone makes mistakes. I mean, like, I think the biggest mistake for a lighting guy would be a blackout, and I'm trying to maybe I've blacked them all out. Speaking of no pun intended, but I don't think I can remember a lot of my mistakes. If I'm honest, I had a funny moment, a very small mistake, but it was. I do laugh at it sometimes. I was doing a television awards show, and of this was theatre. We were shooting theatre pieces within the stage for um, for this television awards show, and it was live. And obviously, theatre and television are very different mediums, and the creativeness of the theatre is one thing, and then the consistency of television is another. And I remember this particular little theatre piece. The director of the theatre piece came to me and said, at the end, I need a snap blackout. I said, no problem. So I put the snap blackout in, and we did. It was after rehearsal, so no one had seen it. We were live now, and at that moment, live on television, we were on a close up of the head and shoulder shot of the main performer as he delivered the last line. And I went snap blackout, and I literally heard the entire Obi van gasp because every single monitor in the van went complete
Went
black.
black.
Black on there. There was nothing to go to, and then I faded up the sequence thereafter. But I learned that no, for television, a blackout is not necessarily a blackout.
It's not necessarily the whole
Small
room to
hints of,
black. Yeah, just the key
small
light
hints of
maybe.
shoulders or something. Yeah.
Okay, well,
But no, I try not to make too many mistakes. But the great thing about lighting, and I often laugh at this, is that when a sound guy makes a mistake, it's pretty obvious. A video guy also makes mistakes, it's pretty obvious. But sometimes lighting guys, we tend to get away with a couple of mistakes here and there without people knowing, because lighting is so, I don't know, they consider us the wild bunch of the crew,
Yep,
we get
absolutely.
to do some. No one really understands what we do from a show point of view, so they let us get away with a few things.
Yeah, I mean, we're not talking about equipment failure here. We are talking about human mistakes. These things do happen.
There is definitely a fair amount of equipment failure from time to time. Yeah, that has happened.
So I mean, my next question was going to be, what did you learn from the experience? But as we said, never ever go full black on TV. So that kind of answers that one.
Full black. Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, it does.
I think just to wrap up, Josh, again, thanks for your time, mate. I just wanted to ask you if you had to give some advice to somebody starting out in this industry, or somebody who's keen, who wants to get into this game, and like, what would you say to them? What would you say to a young Joshua back in the day?
Just be keen and be eager and get involved where you can. Don't obviously now we have access to learn everything online that we can. So there's a lot of that, but don't be afraid to ask questions on site and stick to it, because it does take a little while to get known, and it's not a quick thing, and it is hard work. There'll be times when you think I'm not getting anywhere, but if you stick through it, and 30 years later, like me, suddenly you have a living. So it does take a few years, and be patient, be a good guy. And absorb as much information you can from everybody around you. Don't think you know everything.
Yeah, I suppose be humble and ask questions. Ask
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah. Know that we all have something to learn always. None of us know everything.
My friend, thank you so much for doing this for us today. I mean, I know
pleasure.
you're a busy man. I found you on probably the only day you will have off this month, so I'm very thankful for your time.
And that I'm grateful for. But yeah, an absolute pleasure to be here, bud. And I'm glad to share my knowledge. Knowledge is free, so share it for everyone.
Great, mate. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic day. We'll chat soon.
Yeah.
Cheers, man.